Detective Walsh's phone buzzed with one final message, coordinates leading to a small cemetery on the outskirts of town. There, beneath an unmarked grave, they found Theodore Hamilton's original journals, containing centuries of coded music that had been waiting for this exact moment in history. The grand concert concluded not with silence, but with a new kind of music, one that carried within its notes the combined legacy of every person who had ever worked to protect and empower others. The Academy would continue its work, but now as something more than a school or a safe house. It had become a beacon, broadcasting hope on frequencies that couldn't be corrupted or silenced. Months later, Emma Patterson would take her place at the Academy's grand piano, now both a student and a guardian of its legacy. Her jade pendant, like thousands of others around the world, carried within it a quantum state that was both protection and possibility. When she played, her music contained not just notes, but the encoded promise of a world where such protection might one day become unnecessary. Sarah Chen never returned to Millbrook, but her presence remained in every note played within the Academy's walls. The music box in the tunnels continued its ancient song, its melody carrying forward Theodore Hamilton's dream of a world transformed by the power of harmony. Detective Walsh kept his jade pendant, understanding now that he was part of something far larger than a missing persons case. The Echo Network continued its work, but with a new mission that encompassed both protection and change. The cacophony, rather than being destroyed, had been transformed into a force for systemic transformation. And somewhere in the world, in hidden rooms filled with quantum computers disguised as vintage pianos, Sarah Chen continued to play her part in a symphony that had been centuries in the making, a composition of hope, resilience, and transformation that would echo through generations to come. The last note of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major lingered in the air of Room 7 at the Millbrook Music Academy, but something was different about its resonance. Sarah Chen noticed it immediately, the slight dissonance that shouldn't have been there, like a whispered warning in a language she hadn't spoken in years. Her fingers trembled almost imperceptibly above the ivory keys as her student, 14-year-old Emma Patterson, gathered her sheet music, oblivious to the shift in the atmosphere. The Victorian-era building had always held secrets. Built in 1887 as a wealthy merchant's mansion, it had survived 3 fires, 2 wars, and countless renovations before becoming the town's prestigious music academy. Its walls had absorbed generations of melodies, but tonight they seemed to be playing back something entirely different, something that only Sarah could hear. Same time next week, Emma. Sarah managed to keep her voice steady, years of practice hiding her growing unease. The autumn sun had already surrendered to darkness outside the tall windows, their wavy antique glass distorting the few remaining streaks of purple twilight. She tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear, a nervous habit that had become more frequent over the past 3 weeks. Emma nodded, her fingers fumbling with the brass clasp of her vintage music folder, a family heirloom passed down through 3 generations of Patterson musicians. Yes, Miss Chen. Though I probably won't have the second movement ready by then. Mom's been sick, so practice time has been. She trailed off, noticing for the first time the unusual stillness in her teacher's typically animated expressions. That's perfectly fine, Sarah replied, her dark eyes fixed on a point just beyond Emma's shoulder. Music isn't about rushing, it's about feeling every note, understanding the spaces between them. She paused, then added something she'd never said before, sometimes the most important parts of a piece are in the rests, Emma. Remember that. The Academy's ancient heating system grown to life, its pipes carrying more than just steam through the building's skeletal framework. Sarah had learned its patterns over her 6 years teaching here, which creaks meant settling foundations and which might mean something else entirely. Tonight, the sounds were speaking a different language. Her phone buzzed, 7:43 p.m. The screen displayed a notification she'd been both expecting and dreading, a text message containing only a series of numbers, 27-15-42-31-19. To anyone else, they might have looked like lottery picks or a locker combination. To Sarah, they were confirmation that everything was about to change. The next 17 minutes would become the subject of endless speculation, conspiracy theories, and late-night true crime podcasts. Millbrook, a town that prided itself on its unremarkable nature, would soon find itself at the center of a mystery that would challenge the very foundation of its quiet existence. Sarah Chen's daily routine had been a masterpiece of precision, each movement as carefully choreographed as a symphony. The last lesson ended at 7:45 p.m. 15 minutes to organize tomorrow's materials. The lunch preparation ritual, a practice she'd maintained since her first day at the academy. Departure at 8:05 p.m. sharp. The drive home, 12 minutes through familiar streets, past Mr. Henderson's always illuminated antique shop, around the curve where the old railroad tracks cut through town, and finally onto Maple Street. Home by 8:17 p.m., just in time for her nightly video call with her sister in Seattle. But on this night, as Emma's footsteps faded down the hallway, Sarah broke her routine for the first time in 6 years. She walked to the window, her reflection ghostly in the darkened glass, and removed a small key from inside her mother's jade pendant, a necklace she'd worn every day since arriving in Millbrook. The key fit perfectly into a lock that hadn't existed the day before, hidden behind a loose piece of Victorian molding beneath the windowsill. Inside the small compartment lay a single USB drive, unmarked except for a musical staff etched into its surface. Sarah pocketed it without hesitation, her movements now carrying a deliberate purpose that had nothing to do with teaching piano. The security camera in the rear parking lot would later capture her walking to her car at 8:03 p.m., 2 minutes ahead of schedule. But what the grainy footage couldn't show was the way her hands shook as she adjusted her leather messenger bag, last Christmas's gift from her students, now containing more than just sheet music and lesson plans. It wouldn't reveal the tears that threatened to fall as she looked back at room 7 one last time, knowing she would never see it again. The camera caught her sudden stop, her head turning sharply toward the old groundskeeper's cottage. What it didn't record was the soft whistle that cut through the evening air, 3 notes in a minor key, a signal that had been practiced but never used until this moment. Mr. Peterson, arriving early for his janitorial shift, would later describe to Detective Walsh the scene he witnessed through room 7's window at 7:52 p.m. Sarah stood at the piano, phone pressed between ear and shoulder, writing something with intense concentration. But what Mr. Peterson didn't mention in his first 3 interviews, what he only revealed after the discovery of the second USB drive, was that Sarah had been writing in a way he'd never seen before, right to left, the characters unlike any language he recognized. She looked different, he would tell Detective Walsh months later, after the first bodies were found. Not scared, exactly. More like someone who had finally made up their mind about something important. But it was her eyes that stayed with me, they had the same look my wife had when she decided to testify against her father, knowing what it would cost her. The 3-minute and 14-second phone call Sarah received at 7:49 p.m. became the subject of countless analysis attempts. The number that didn't exist. The duration matching Chopin's Minute Waltz. But it was the background noise on the call, analyzed months later by FBI audio specialists, that would finally break the case open, the sound of a music box playing a melody that hadn't been manufactured since 1962. In the Academy's refrigerator, her perfectly packed lunch sat untouched, quinoa salad with roasted vegetables, an apple, and dark chocolate-covered almonds. But under the apple, pressed against the bottom of the container, was a micro SD card that would take investigators 3 months to find and another 6 to decrypt. Emma Patterson's delayed revelation about her final lesson would prove crucial. Sarah had insisted on repeating measure 27 of the nocturne, emphasizing a specific sequence of notes. When played in isolation and translated through the cipher later found in Sarah's jade pendant, these notes formed geographical coordinates that would lead to the first of many hidden safes across 3 states. The security footage shows Sarah's silver Prius leaving the parking lot at 8:07 p.m., turning left instead of its usual right. Traffic cameras never captured it on any of the expected routes. The car would be found 3 days later in the long-term parking lot of a bus station 200 miles away, its interior immaculate except for a single sheet of music left on the passenger seat, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, but with the notes rearranged into what would later be recognized as a sophisticated code. Detective Marcus Walsh arrived at the academy at 10:43 p.m. that night, his leather notebook already open to a fresh page. Standing in room 7, he noticed something that others had missed. The Chopin piece was upside down on the piano stand, and when turned right side up, revealed a series of numbers in the margins. But it was what he found behind the piano that first suggested this was more than a simple missing persons case. A single jade earring, identical to the one Sarah always wore, broken as if in a struggle, yet placed too deliberately to be accidental. Detective Marcus Walsh stared at the wall of his office, now covered in photographs, newspaper clippings, and red string connecting seemingly unrelated pieces of evidence. At the center was a staff photo of Sarah Chen from the Millbrook Music Academy's website, the only image that hadn't vanished from the internet. In it, she sat at the grand piano, her jade pendant catching the light in a way that now seemed deliberate, almost like a signal. "You're seeing patterns where there aren't any," Detective Laura Martinez said from the doorway, coffee steam rising from 2 cups in her hands. She'd transferred from Boston's Human Trafficking Task Force 3 weeks ago, just days after Sarah's disappearance. Her arrival timing would later prove to be anything but coincidental. "Look at this," Walsh replied, tapping a finger against a yellowed newspaper clipping from 2018. 6 years ago, another piano teacher vanished from a small conservatory in Vermont. Same circumstances, packed lunch left behind, car found at a bus station, last seen writing something unusual. He paused, pulling out his notebook. But here's what connects them: both women wore jade jewelry. Both specialized in Chopin. And both had students who reported hearing strange phone calls during their final lessons. The office hummed with the sound of overworked computer fans and the constant chatter of police scanners. Outside, Millbrook was experiencing its first snow of the season, the November wind carrying whispers of theories about Sarah Chen's disappearance. Some said she'd been running from an abusive relationship. Others claimed she was part of a witness protection program. The truth, as Walsh was beginning to discover, was far more complex. His computer chimed, another email from Sarah's sister, Dr. Maya Chen, a quantum cryptography researcher at MIT. She'd arrived in Millbrook 3 days after Sarah's disappearance, bringing with her a stack of their childhood photos and a mysterious leather-bound notebook she refused to let anyone examine. "Detective Walsh," the email began, "I've found something in Sarah's old music theory notebooks. The compositions she wrote while getting her doctorate, they're not just music. They're coordinates, dates, and names, all encoded using a variation of the Fibonacci sequence combined with musical intervals. I'm attaching a partial decode, but there's more. Much more. Meet me at the Academy tonight. Room 7. And come alone." Walsh checked his watch, 3:47 p.m. The same time that Sarah Chen's YouTube video had garnered its first comment, posted by a user named Chopin Opus 27, a string of numbers that, when converted to musical notes, spelled out a warning: they're watching the Academy. Martinez set down the coffees and pulled up a chair. "There's something else you should know," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Before Boston, I worked a case in Singapore. A trafficking ring was using music schools as fronts, but not for what you'd think. They were smuggling people out, not in. Saving them. The organizers all wore jade, a symbol of protection in Chinese culture. And their leader? She was known only by her call sign, the Nocturne." Walsh's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, 27-15-42-31-19, the same sequence found in Sarah's final message. But this time, it was followed by another set, 41.3851 degrees north, 72.9945 degrees west. Those coordinates, Martinez said, already pulling them up on her computer. They point to the old Hamilton estate, Walsh finished. The building that became the Music Academy. But not the main structure, the groundskeeper's cottage. As if on cue, Mr. Peterson appeared in the doorway, his usually calm demeanor shattered by urgency. "You need to see this," he said, holding out a maintenance log from the academy. "The cottage. I've been checking it every night for 6 years, but not for the school. For her. For Sarah." The log's pages contained more than just maintenance notes. Hidden within routine entries about leaky pipes and faulty wiring were carefully coded messages, each corresponding to a different musical piece in Sarah's teaching repertoire. But it was the final entry, dated the day of her disappearance, that caused Walsh's breath to catch. Final movement complete. The conductor takes the stage at midnight. Dr. Maya Chen's presence in Millbrook had stirred something else, memories among the town's older residents about another Chen family, one that had lived in the Hamilton estate decades ago. Their daughter, a musical prodigy, had disappeared in 1962, the same year the music box heard in Sarah's final phone call was manufactured. Walsh spread out a new set of photographs on his desk, surveillance images from bus stations across 3 states. Each showed a woman matching Sarah's description, but with subtle differences. Different clothes, different hairstyles, but always the same jade pendant. And in each photo, she appeared to be accompanying someone, different people each time, all looking over their shoulders, all carrying identical black instrument cases. "The Academy's renovation records," Martinez said, pulling up files on her laptop. "Look at the contractors hired in 2018. The company doesn't exist, but the work was done. New walls were added, but the building's square footage didn't change. And the power usage since then has been consistently higher than it should be, especially at night." Walsh remembered something Emma Patterson had mentioned during her 3rd interview. "Ms. Chen always said music could save lives. I thought she meant it made people happy, but the way she said it that last day, it was like she was talking about something else entirely." The investigation had revealed other oddities. Sarah's students, particularly those who had shown signs of trauma or abuse, had a habit of suddenly transferring to other schools, often in different states. Their families would move abruptly, leaving no forwarding addresses. But when traced, they all appeared to be safe, thriving even, with new identities and fresh starts. Dr. Maya Chen's notebook, which she guarded so carefully, had been photographed by a security camera when she briefly set it down at a coffee shop. The enhanced image showed a single page of what appeared to be sheet music, but when overlaid with the numbers from Sarah's final message, it formed a map, a network of safe houses and escape routes spanning the entire eastern seaboard. As dusk approached, Walsh gathered his team in the station's conference room. The walls were now covered with new evidence, photographs of jade jewelry recovered from other missing persons cases, sheet music with hidden coordinates, and satellite images of the academy grounds showing unexpected heat signatures beneath the groundskeeper's cottage. "We've been looking at this wrong," he announced. "We're not trying to find someone who disappeared. We're trying to understand why she let herself be found missing." Martinez nodded, pulling up a database on the main screen. "In the past decade, over 300 people have vanished across the country, all with connections to music schools or conservatories. All presumed victims. But what if they weren't victims at all? What if this is part of something bigger?" The room fell silent as security footage from the academy began playing on the screen, not from the night of Sarah's disappearance, but from 3 years earlier. It showed her in room 7, teaching a student none of them had interviewed, a girl whose file didn't exist in the school's records. As they watched, Sarah played a specific sequence of notes, and the girl's entire demeanor changed. She reached into her bag and pulled out a phone, dialing a number. The next day, both the girl and her mother disappeared from their abusive home, leaving no trace. Walsh's phone lit up with another text, "The music never stopped." It just changed keys. This time, he recognized the number. It belonged to a burner phone found in Sarah's car at the bus station. But according to the records, the phone had made only one call in 6 years, and it wasn't to another phone. It was to a number that, when translated into coordinates, led to a storage facility in Massachusetts. The facility's security footage from the day after Sarah's disappearance showed a woman in a black coat, her face hidden beneath an umbrella, accessing a unit registered to Chopin Students Association. Inside, investigators would later find hundreds of identical jade pendants, each containing a different microSD card. As night fell over Millbrook, Dr. Maya Chen waited in room 7, her brother's notebook open to a page filled with what appeared to be random musical notes. But when played at exactly 27 beats per minute, those notes became something else entirely, a message that would change everything they thought they knew about Sarah Chen and the true purpose of the Millbrook Music Academy. The storage unit's metal door groaned open at exactly midnight, revealing walls lined with vintage musical instruments. Detective Walsh stood beside Dr. Maya Chen, their breaths visible in the cold December air. The facility's security cameras had mysteriously gone dark 5 minutes earlier, just like they had the night Sarah disappeared. "It's not about the instruments," Maya said, running her fingers along a violin case. "It's about what's inside them." She pressed a hidden catch, and the violin's body split open, revealing a hollow compartment containing a sleek laptop and a hard drive marked with the same musical staff etched into Sarah's USB drive. Martinez appeared in the doorway, snow melting on her shoulders. "We've got movement at the academy." Someone accessed room 7 using Sarah's key card, a key card that was supposedly deactivated 2 months ago. The laptop powered on, its screen displaying a single music sheet, Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. But the notes were wrong, deliberately altered in a pattern that Walsh had started to recognize. Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard, entering the modified notes as an encryption key. Sarah wasn't just teaching music, Maya explained as files began populating the screen. She was part of an organization called ECHO, a network of musicians, teachers, and activists working to identify and extract people from dangerous situations. The music lessons were covers for assessment and communication. Files flooded the screen, photographs, coordinates, identity documents, and most importantly, a list of names, hundreds of them, each paired with a musical piece and a series of dates. Walsh recognized some of the dates, they corresponded to reported disappearances across the country. "But why the academy?" Martinez asked, her law enforcement instincts warring with her growing understanding. "Why Millbrook?" Maya pulled up an architectural diagram of the Hamilton estate from 1887. "Because of what's beneath it." The original owner, Theodore Hamilton, wasn't just a wealthy merchant. He was a key figure in the Underground Railroad. The estate's tunnel system was never fully mapped, and never fully decommissioned. Walsh's phone buzzed, another message from the mysterious Chopin Opus 27. This time, it was an audio file, 27 seconds of what seemed like random piano notes. But when played backward and overlaid with the pattern from Sarah's last lesson, it formed clear words: "The conductor arrives at dawn. Sanctuary protocol initiated." The investigation had uncovered something else, a pattern of musical scholarships awarded to students across the country, all funded by a foundation that existed only on paper. Each recipient had something in common: they or someone close to them had been targeted by trafficking networks. The lessons weren't random, Maya continued, pulling up more files. Each piece of music assigned had a specific purpose. The nocturnes were for initial contact. The ballades for risk assessment. The waltzes. She paused, her voice catching. The waltzes were for immediate extraction. Sarah assigned Emma Patterson a waltz the day before she disappeared. Walsh's mind raced back to Emma's mother, her mysterious illness, her sudden recovery, and the family's planned vacation scheduled for the following week. It wasn't just Sarah who had vanished, she was orchestrating a much larger disappearance. The academy's basement had yielded another clue. Behind a false wall, investigators found a room filled with recording equipment. Analysis of the hard drives revealed thousands of hours of piano music, each recording containing subtly embedded messages when analyzed through specialized software. "Look at this," Martinez said, pointing to her tablet. She'd been running facial recognition on Sarah's Academy ID photo through international databases. She appears in photographs from music schools in 7 countries over the past decade. Different names, different backgrounds, but always teaching Chopin, always wearing jade. A hidden pattern emerged in the scholarship records. Every third recipient had connections to law enforcement or government agencies. They weren't just saving potential victims, they were building a network of allies within the system itself. The groundskeeper's cottage yielded its secrets at dawn. Behind the weathered walls, investigators discovered a command center disguised as a music storage room. Vintage synthesizers housed modern communications equipment. Musical scores concealed maps of trafficking routes. And most surprisingly, a wall of photographs, hundreds of them, showing people who had been reported missing, now living safely under new identities. "It's not just about getting people out," Maya explained, her fingers tracing the edges of a photograph showing a young girl at a piano recital. "It's about giving them a new life, a new identity protected by music. Every piece they learn contains coded information about their new background. The muscle memory of playing becomes the key to remembering who they've become." The investigation took an unexpected turn when analysis of Sarah's jade pendant revealed microscopic etchings, sheet music so small it could only be read under a microscope. When transcribed, it formed a musical piece that had never been published, a variation on Chopin's revolutionary etude, composed by the missing Chen daughter in 1962. The Echo network didn't start with Sarah, Maya revealed, opening her father's journal. "Our aunt, Lisa Chen, founded it after escaping trafficking herself. She used her musical training to create a code that couldn't be broken because it wasn't just about the notes, it was about how they were played. Every performer would interpret them slightly differently, making the messages impossible to decrypt without both the music and the musician." Walsh's team discovered something else in the Academy's archives. Every piano in the building had been modified. Tiny sensors in the keys recorded not just which notes were played, but how they were played, the pressure, the timing, the subtle variations that made each performance unique. This data was being transmitted to servers around the world, creating a constantly evolving musical cryptography system. The breakthrough came at 3:47 a.m., exactly 1 week after Sarah's disappearance. Every computer in the police station suddenly began playing the same melody, the minute waltz, but at 27 beats per minute. When the audio was visualized as a waveform, it formed a series of coordinates pointing to locations across the globe. At each location, a music school, a jade pendant, and a pianist teaching Chopin. Martinez's contact in Singapore confirmed what they had begun to suspect. The trafficking ring they thought they were investigating was actually a sophisticated rescue network. The victims were carefully chosen operatives, each trained in both music and covert operations. The disappearances were elaborately choreographed extractions, using the universal language of music to communicate across borders and cultures. "But why let us get this close?" Walsh asked, staring at the wall of evidence that now told a completely different story. "Why leave a trail at all?" Maya smiled, an expression eerily similar to her sister's. "Because, detective, you're not just finding us. We're recruiting you." She opened her laptop one last time, revealing a database of law enforcement officials worldwide, all former music students, all wearing jade, all part of a network hiding in plain sight. The final piece clicked into place when Emma Patterson's mother appeared at the station, her illness miraculously cured. In her hand, she held a jade pendant identical to Sarah's. "We're ready," she said simply. "The concert begins tonight." As snow fell over Millbrook, the Academy's lights blazed to life. One by one, cars began arriving, not just local police, but federal agents, Interpol operators, and musicians from around the world. Each visitor wore a small jade pendant, each carried an instrument case, and each knew exactly 3 measures of a Chopin piece that, when played together, would reveal the next phase of Echo's grand operation. Sarah Chen hadn't disappeared. She had simply moved to the next movement of a symphony that had been playing for decades, a symphony of salvation, written in the universal language of music, performed by an orchestra of shadows. The Millbrook Music Academy's Grand Hall hadn't hosted a concert in 15 years, not since the mysterious fire that claimed its original Steinway grand piano. Yet on this frigid December night, hundreds of jade-wearing musicians filed silently through its restored doors, each carrying an instrument case that contained far more than music. Detective Walsh stood in the wings, his police badge now accompanied by a small jade pendant, a gift from Dr. Maya Chen that felt heavier than its physical weight suggested. Martinez was positioned in the balcony, coordinating with a global task force that had materialized like notes from a forgotten symphony. "The quantum encryption is holding," Maya whispered, her laptop displaying a cascade of musical notations that morphed into security protocols. Every pendant is broadcasting on a unique frequency, creating a mesh network that can't be penetrated without the exact emotional resonance of Chopin's original performances. But someone had penetrated it. At exactly 3:47 a.m., every screen in the building flickered to life, displaying a single message: "The wrong notes will shatter more than silence." It was signed with a symbol they'd never seen before, a broken treble clef that seemed to bleed into the digital void. The first sign that something was wrong came from Emma Patterson. During what was supposed to be a routine security check, she noticed something about the sheet music distributed to the assembled musicians. "These aren't Ms. Chen's arrangements," she said, her young voice carrying the weight of unexpected expertise. "The time signatures are shifted by 1/27th of a beat." Walsh's phone buzzed with an alert from the Academy's subsurface sensors. The tunnel system beneath the building was showing unusual activity, not the planned movements of Echo operatives, but something else, something that pulsed with the rhythm of an anti-symphony. "We have a breach," Martinez's voice crackled through the secure channel. "Someone's been playing both sides of this composition." She transmitted a series of images, jade pendants recovered from trafficking operations across Europe, each containing a corrupted version of Echo's encryption key. The revelation hit like a discordant chord. There was a counter-organization, one that had been studying Echo's methods, mimicking its patterns, and preparing to turn the sanctuary system against itself. They called themselves the Cacophony. Maya's fingers flew across her keyboard, bringing up personnel files that seemed to pixelate and distort before their eyes. "They're not just corrupting our network," she realized, horror creeping into her voice. "They're using our own musical algorithms to identify every safe house, every operative, every person we've ever helped relocate." The Grand Hall's temperature dropped suddenly, frost crystallizing on the windows in patterns that resembled sheet music. The emergency exits sealed themselves, responding to a protocol that shouldn't have existed. And from somewhere deep beneath the Academy, the sound of a music box began to play, the same melody from Sarah's final phone call, but twisted, wrong, its notes carrying the weight of decay. "It's not just about finding us," Maya said, her face illuminated by cascading lines of code. "They're trying to reverse the entire program. Every piece of music we've used to encode new identities, they're turning them into tracking beacons." Walsh remembered something Sarah had written in her final message: "The silence between the notes tells the real story." He'd been thinking about it wrong. It wasn't the music that mattered, it was the spaces between, the moments when the network went quiet, when the true signals could be sent. The Academy's ancient heating system groaned to life, but instead of warm air, it carried something else, a fine mist that smelled of aged paper and corroded brass. Anyone who had ever played a wind instrument recognized it instantly: key oil, atomized and weaponized. "They're trying to deteriorate the instruments," Emma gasped, understanding faster than the adults around her. "If the instruments fail during the performance." She didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what would happen if the grand concert, Echo's most ambitious coordination effort to date, fell apart. Hundreds of ongoing extraction operations would be exposed. Thousands of carefully constructed new identities would unravel. But Sarah Chen had prepared for this. In room 7, untouched since her disappearance, the metronome still ticked at its impossibly slow 27 beats per minute. Walsh had assumed it was a message, but Maya saw it differently. It's not marking time, she realized. It's counting down. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mr. Peterson, the Academy's janitor and longtime Echo operative, had been maintaining more than just the building. Every night for 6 years, he had been recording the ambient sounds of the Academy, every creak, every whisper, every echo of its century-old voices. When played simultaneously with the corrupted signals from the cacophony, these recordings created a cancellation wave that revealed a hidden frequency. Within it, Sarah Chen's voice emerged, speaking in a code that only her sister could understand. The music box holds more than melody. Find the original recording. The race began. While Martinez's global team worked to protect Echo's network from digital infiltration, Walsh and Maya descended into the Academy's basement, following the sound of that haunting music box. The tunnel system had changed since their last visit. New passages had opened, while others had sealed themselves, creating a labyrinth that pulsed with subsonic frequencies. They found the music box in a chamber that shouldn't have existed, its mechanism modified with technology that bridged centuries. Inside, beneath layers of classical orchestration, was a prototype quantum encryption key, the original template from which all of Echo's codes had been derived. Sarah didn't run from a threat, Maya breathed, understanding dawning in her eyes. She became the bait, leading them to believe they'd found our weakness, while she was actually positioning their entire operation exactly where we needed them. Above ground, the concert was about to begin. Hundreds of musicians raised their instruments, each one now recognized as both a tool of salvation and a potential weapon. Emma Patterson sat at the grand piano, her young fingers hovering over keys that could either save or destroy countless lives. The first notes of Chopin's revolutionary etude filled the hall, but this wasn't the version anyone expected. This was Sarah Chen's final composition, a piece that incorporated every frequency needed to neutralize the cacophony's attack while simultaneously triggering a hidden protocol in Echo's network. The jade pendants began to pulse with a soft green light, each one adding its unique signature to a quantum harmony that grew stronger with every measure. The corrupted signals from the cacophony's infiltration attempted to interfere, creating a battle of frequencies that manifested as visible waves in the air. Then, at precisely the moment the music reached its crescendo, every screen in the building displayed the same message: the conductor takes her final bow. The image was accompanied by a live video feed showing Sarah Chen, very much alive, playing a piano in what appeared to be an underground bunker. Behind her, rows of servers processed the incoming data from the concert, using the combined musical signatures to locate and neutralize every compromised node in Echo's network. But the cacophony had one final move. The Academy's power grid surged, threatening to destroy the building's ancient electrical system. In the basement, Walsh and Maya watched in horror as water began seeping through the walls of the tunnel system, threatening not just the equipment but the structural integrity of the entire complex. The next few minutes would determine not just the fate of Echo's network, but the lives of hundreds of people who had risked everything for a chance at freedom. And somewhere in the darkness beneath the Academy, a second music box began to play, its melody an exact counterpoint to the first, creating a harmony that would either save them all or bring the entire system crashing down. The Academy's foundations trembled as two melodies battled in the darkness, Sarah Chen's quantum-encrypted music box harmonizing against the cacophony's corrupted counterpoint. Water continued rising in the tunnel system, its rhythm adding an unwanted percussion to the orchestral warfare above. Detective Walsh stood ankle-deep in the flooding basement, his jade pendant pulsing with an urgent green light. Beside him, Dr. Maya Chen had connected her laptop directly to the original music box, its century-old mechanism now interfacing with technology that shouldn't exist for decades. The water isn't random, Maya suddenly realized, studying its flow patterns. Look at how it's moving, it's following the same time signature as Chopin's Raindrop Prelude. She pulled up a visualization of the water's resonance frequency, overlaying it with the sheet music from Sarah's final lesson. This isn't an attack. It's the final failsafe. Above ground, the grand concert had transformed into something unprecedented in musical history. Hundreds of musicians, each wearing a quantum-linked jade pendant, performed a piece that existed simultaneously in multiple temporal phases. Emma Patterson's hands flew across the grand piano's keys, her young mind somehow comprehending patterns that had taken Sarah Chen years to perfect. Martinez's voice crackled through the secure channel, "We've got confirmation from global teams. The Cacophonies network is destabilizing, but they've triggered some kind of deadman switch. Every computer system connected to their operation is broadcasting a signal that's causing physical damage to nearby instruments." The truth about the cacophony emerged in fragments of data, each piece more disturbing than the last. They weren't just a criminal organization, they were former Echo operatives who believed that the power of their musical encryption system should be used for more than just rescue operations. Their leader, known only as the Conductor, had been Sarah Chen's mentor before the split. In room 7, the metronome's steady pulse suddenly shifted, its rhythm matching the frequency of the rising water below. The numbers hidden in Sarah's last message rearranged themselves into a new pattern. 27-15-42-31-19 became coordinates for 5 locations around the world, each one housing a quantum node that could either save or destroy Echo's entire network. "She knew," Maya whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of her jade pendant. "Sarah knew the cacophony would try to use our own methods against us. That's why she disappeared, to make them think they had forced Echo into a defensive position, while she was actually implementing a completely new layer of protection." The Academy's ancient heating system, which had been pumping key oil mist through the building, suddenly reversed its flow. The mist began to crystallize in mid-air, forming patterns that matched the structural resonance of every instrument in the Grand Hall. Rather than damaging the instruments, the crystallized oil created a protective barrier that amplified their quantum signatures. Emma's voice cut through the chaos. "Ms. Chen taught me something the day before she disappeared. She said that every piece of music has a shadow, a perfect inverse that can either strengthen or destroy the original composition. She made me practice a sequence that felt wrong, dissonant. But when played against the Raindrop Prelude, the young pianist's hands moved without hesitation, performing the inverse melody that Sarah had secretly encoded into her muscle memory. The discordant notes sliced through the cacophony's interference patterns, creating windows of pure silence in which Echo's true signals could propagate. Deep beneath the Academy, Walsh and Maya discovered something extraordinary in the flooded tunnels. The water's flow had revealed previously hidden markings on the walls, musical notations etched into the stone by the original builders of the Underground Railroad. These weren't just escape routes, they were the first attempts at using music as a cryptographic key. The Hamilton estate wasn't chosen randomly, Maya explained, her voice filled with awe. Theodore Hamilton wasn't just helping people escape, he was developing a system of musical codes that would evolve into what we use today. Sarah didn't create Echo's methodology, she rediscovered it. The cacophony's deadman switch triggered at exactly 3:47 a.m., but its effect wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of destroying Echo's network, it completed a quantum encryption sequence that Sarah had been building for 6 years. Every jade pendant in the world connected to Echo's network began resonating at the same frequency, creating a global web of harmonized protection. In the Grand Hall, the concert reached its climax. The combined frequencies of hundreds of instruments, each playing its part in Sarah's master composition, generated a standing wave that materialized as visible patterns in the air. These patterns matched exactly with the markings in the underground tunnels, completing a cryptographic circuit that had been waiting over a century to be activated. The conductor's true identity was revealed through a cascade of decrypted files. Dr. Elizabeth Hamilton, direct descendant of Theodore Hamilton and former prodigy of the very academy she now sought to destroy. Her belief that the musical encryption system should be used for more than rescue operations had led to the creation of the Cacophony, a shadow organization that twisted Echo's methods into tools of control rather than liberation. Sarah's video feed suddenly expanded, showing not just her playing the piano in the bunker, but an entire network of similar facilities around the world. Each one housed a quantum computer disguised as a vintage piano, all working in concert to process and protect the identities of thousands of rescued individuals. The music box wasn't just a key, Maya realized, studying the original device's mechanism. It's a quantum entanglement generator, using the mechanical uncertainty of its century-old components to create encryption keys that can't be predicted or broken. Sarah didn't just outmaneuver the Cacophony, she used their attack to complete Echo's transformation into something they could never corrupt. The water in the tunnels reached its peak level, forming a perfect standing wave that matched the resonance of every musical performance happening above. In that moment of harmonic convergence, the true scope of Sarah Chen's plan became clear. The Academy itself was an instrument, its architecture, its history, and its hidden passages all designed to amplify and protect the frequencies that kept Echo's network secure. Emma Patterson, still playing the inverse melody that Sarah had taught her, suddenly understood her role in the grand composition. Each of Sarah's students had been given a piece of the puzzle, not just musical knowledge, but fragments of a quantum encryption key that only became complete when played together. The Cacophony's network began to collapse, its corrupted signals overwhelmed by the pure harmonics of Echo's global concert. But Dr. Elizabeth Hamilton had one final move. From her hidden location, she activated a sequence that threatened to expose the identities of every person Echo had ever helped, unless Sarah Chen surrendered the original encryption key. In that moment of crisis, as the fate of thousands hung in the balance, a new sound emerged from the Academy's depths. A third music box, its existence unknown even to Echo's most senior operatives, began to play. Its melody was neither Sarah's quantum-encrypted signal or the Cacophony's corrupted counterpoint. It was something older, more fundamental, a piece composed by Theodore Hamilton himself, designed to resolve the very conflict his descendants would face centuries later. Theodore Hamilton's music box echoed through the flooded tunnels, its melody older than the Civil War itself. The sound seemed to ripple through time, each note carrying centuries of coded hope. In the grand hall above, Emma Patterson's hands stilled on the piano keys as the ancient tune reached her ears, triggering a memory of something Sarah Chen had once said: "Some songs aren't meant to be played, they're meant to be remembered." Detective Walsh watched as Dr. Maya Chen's expression transformed from confusion to revelation. "This isn't just about encryption," she breathed, her jade pendant pulsing in sync with the antique melody. "It's about legacy. Every generation of Hamiltons, every iteration of Echo, we've all been playing parts of the same song." The Cacophony's final ultimatum hung in the digitally charged air: surrender Echo's encryption key, or watch as thousands of carefully protected identities were exposed. Dr. Elizabeth Hamilton, the conductor, appeared on every screen in the building, her face a mirror of determination that eerily matched Sarah Chen's. "You never understood the true power of what our ancestors built," Elizabeth's voice resonated through the Academy's ancient speakers. "This was never meant to be just a rescue operation. Hamilton's music was designed to change the world, not just hide from it." But Sarah Chen had anticipated even this. The video feed from her bunker shifted, revealing not just one Sarah, but dozens, each in a different location, each playing a different variation of the same piece. She had fractalized herself across Echo's network, becoming a quantum encryption key that couldn't be captured or corrupted. "The third music box," Maya explained, her fingers flying across her laptop's keyboard, "it's not just playing a melody. It's generating a cascade of quantum states that match perfectly with Theodore Hamilton's original composition. He didn't just create a code, he created a quantum algorithm centuries before quantum computing existed. In room 7, the metronome's steady pulse suddenly aligned with the rhythm of Theodore Hamilton's tune. The water in the tunnels, rather than causing destruction, began conducting the quantum frequencies through the Academy's very foundations. The building itself transformed into a resonance chamber, amplifying and purifying the harmonized signals from hundreds of jade pendants worldwide. Emma Patterson, understanding flowing through her like music, began to play again. But this time, she wasn't following any written notes. Her fingers found the spaces between Theodore Hamilton's melody, weaving a counterpoint that belonged neither to echo nor the cacophony. It was something new, a bridge between protection and transformation. The truth about the Hamilton estate emerged in full. Theodore Hamilton hadn't just built a stop on the Underground Railroad, he had created a prototype for what would become the most sophisticated rescue network in history. The music wasn't just a code, it was a key to unlocking human potential, a way to embed hope and resilience into the very fabric of memory. Dr. Elizabeth Hamilton's network began to fluctuate as the combined frequencies of Sarah's quantum nodes and Theodore's original algorithm created interference patterns that couldn't be predicted or controlled. The cacophony's corrupted signals started transforming, not into destruction, but into harmony. She's not trying to destroy the identities, Maya realized, watching the data streams shift and merge. She's trying to make them permanent. The cacophony wasn't built to expose people, it was designed to force echo to evolve, to become something that couldn't just hide people, but could actually change the systems that made hiding necessary. Sarah's voice, clear and unwavering, filled every room of the Academy. The music never stopped because it was never meant to end. Every person we helped, every identity we protected, they're not just survivors. They're notes in a symphony that's been playing for centuries. The quantum harmonics reached a critical threshold. In that moment of perfect resonance, every jade pendant in Echo's network began broadcasting on a frequency that hadn't existed before, a hybrid of protection and empowerment that would transform both organizations forever. Detective Walsh understood at last why Sarah had chosen to disappear exactly when she did. She hadn't been running from the cacophony or protecting Echo's secrets. She had been conducting the most ambitious revolution in the network's history, a transformation that required both organizations to believe they were in conflict. Emma's improvised bridge between the two musical traditions began to spread, picked up by other musicians around the world. The jade pendants pulsed with a new kind of light, neither the pure green of echo nor the corrupted frequencies of the cacophony, but a quantum state that existed in both conditions simultaneously. Dr. Elizabeth Hamilton's screens showed her expression shifting from determination to understanding. The conductor had achieved her goal, though not in the way she had planned. Echo would no longer just hide people from broken systems, it would help them change those systems from within. The water in the tunnels began to recede, leaving behind patterns in the stone that matched both Theodore Hamilton's original notes and the quantum encryption algorithms of the modern network. The Academy's architecture had protected these secrets for over a century, waiting for the moment when both traditions could finally merge. Sarah Chen's quantum nodes synchronized one final time, creating a global network that was neither purely protective nor purely transformative. The jade pendants would continue their work, but now they carried an additional frequency, one that resonated with the power to change the world that had made their protection necessary.